But a group funnel is where all of your different platforms, all of the ways you're doing marketing, you funnel people towards a free community. And in that free community, you kind of give a taste of the services or the offering that you have. Um, so in a way, giving away free value in your free group community. And so people get to know you.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSell here, your host of the Model FA podcast and CEO of Model FA. And I couldn't be more impressed with the guest that we have today and the work that he's doing within the advisor community, bringing folks together, highlighting some movers and shakers. And I'm excited to share the story of how we met. But we have Joe Moss joining us today. He's a community builder over at Pro Advisor Suite and a connector as well. So with that being said, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Really happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, of course. So it's interesting, how we met. So I didn't know who you were. I don't know if you actually knew who I was, but you've been doing a lot of really good work on LinkedIn specifically. Two things that have stood out. One is you put together an article highlighting folks that have a rather large LinkedIn following, and you're monitoring their growth so that you can sort of share with folks how to grow their LinkedIn presence. And then you also did another article that aggregated all the top industry podcasts as well. And those two articles are what brought you and I together. And I was like, dude, first of all, thank you. This is great. And also, hey, you want to hop on the pod with us? So I just thought that was a really cool strategy to get on people's radars. And before we go through kind of where you came up with that idea, strategy, whatever you want to call it, first give us some context, Joe, about how'd you get into the industry? Like, were you fresh out of college and you started Pro Advisor Suite, or what were the steps from after school to now?
Yeah. So this is actually like my second career of sorts. My first 6 years or so out of college, I was a real estate agent. And I also did like a couple of house flips and did some residential contracting. So kind of a completely different industry than now. But I was trading stocks like throughout that time and just interested in investments and personal finance. Reading like the Rockstar Finance blog. If you remember that back in the day, there was like a list of 1,000 different personal finance blogs. Um, and then eventually, found Michael Kitz's and Alan Moore and was listening to both of their podcasts for a few years. And then I pursued a job in the industry. So I started out as a paraplanner, and then worked my way through a few jobs to where I am now.
And where did the idea of Pro Advisor Suite, where'd that come from?
Sure. So to be honest, this wasn't actually my idea. It was my co-founder's idea. We had been chatting on LinkedIn back and forth for several months. And then he wrote to me one day and he's like, are you familiar with Chalice Network? And I was like, kind of. They're like this huge thing that offers discounts, right? And he was like, yeah, what if we did something similar, but like just advisor tech? So I was like, that sounds like a great idea. So the job I was at the time actually was kind of phasing out. So it was a great opportunity for me to start working on Pro Advisor Suite. And I really love advisor tech, and it just happened to be a great fit. And so, it's led to where I am now.
Awesome. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but for simplification purposes, and I know there's a community aspect and things like that, so I don't want to discount that. But at its core, are you basically building relationships with tech companies, to be able to provide a distilled list of the top tech platforms that advisors should subscribe to, and then ultimately providing a discount based on the relationship that you've developed with that company? Is that sort of Pro Advisor Suite in a nutshell, or what am I missing?
Basically, I mean, it's kind of like a media platform or like outsourced marketing for advisor tech. Um, I also just see it as an opportunity to simplify the field for advisors because there's over 400 advisor tech companies now, and that's incredibly overwhelming for me even. Um, so just kind of doing a lot of demos, figuring out what I like, what I don't like, and then filtering that down to a core set of companies that I strongly recommend. Um, and that I feel like that makes it slightly easier for advisors to know what companies to look at first, I guess.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming. I know when I first took over the hosting of our podcast, I used Michael Kitsis's uh, like tech map that he puts out every year.
Yep.
And I just started picking folks, off the list, shooting them emails, giving them calls, inviting them on the podcast. And it's a lot, right? And I was looking at it through a different lens of who could be a great guest on the podcast. But when you think about an advisor, right, for every category, whether it's, billing and reporting or CRMs, it's like, imagine how many demos they have to go through, to arrive. I think there's, 100, 200, however many, folks on that document that he puts out. So I like that you're kind of doing the heavy lifting for them. I almost view it similar-ish, and this is a stretch, but similar-ish to like hiring a recruiter to help you find human capital, where they deal with looking at the resume, doing the initial interview, and kind of filtering the best candidates over. You're kind of doing something similar, but with tech. Um, that said, what other components are there around Pro Advisor Suite specifically outside of just discounts for tech? Because you're using a cool platform called is it School,
Yep.
right?
School. I'm actually wearing a sweater.
Oh, there you go. And I actually saw someone that I admire and look up to. And I've read a bunch of his books. I've listened to a bunch of his content. Alex Hermosi made an announcement just a few weeks ago at the time of this recording that it's his largest ever investment, that he's made into School. And for those listening, it's SKOOL. But tell us about how you're leveraging School from a community standpoint. And I'd also be curious as to, do you see a way that advisors can integrate a community aspect into their business as well?
Sure. Yeah, no, so that investment probably happened between the last time we talked and now, I'm
Yeah, it
guessing.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was super exciting. I mean, Alex Ramosi has a huge following. Um, and I know I really like School and I am telling everybody I know about it, but I'm trying to figure out why I like it so much. And I think it's because I really like entrepreneurship. I like the ability to create an income and not have to work a corporate job, kind of leave the rat race in a way, and do your own thing. And I think that School is like the best platform to start a business I've ever seen. And Alex Ramosi said the same thing. He's like, I'm investing in this because it's an amazing platform to start a business. So School is a community platform. Like if you think of Facebook and then Facebook groups, it's like just the Facebook groups part without all the rest of Facebook. So it's basically just a bunch of communities. But I just see a lot of potential for it. I mean, their goal is to hit 1 billion users. Um, you know, After LinkedIn, I just feel like School is going to be like a really fast growing social media platform, basically.
And what are some of the features or functions that you enjoy in terms of how it's, helping build community within your business?
Yeah, so it's a very simple platform, and some people don't like that for some reasons. But the founder, Sam Ovens, basically said like everything you need, nothing you don't. So, and a little bit more about Sam Ovens. So he was the founder of consulting.com. He was big into like the online business, selling courses type space. And so when he was running course programs, he noticed that people were like taking billing on one platform, hosting their courses on an LMS platform, having a Facebook group, and like cobbling together 3 or 4 systems to run a community slash course business. And he was like, what if I put all these together on one platform and just make it super simple to use? So it has a community feed, so you can make announcements. Members can chat and create posts and stuff. It has a calendar, so like all your upcoming events can be on the calendar. It has a classroom, so you can still have courses like a standard LMS, learning management system. Um, it has leaderboards, so like you can, and this is kind of fun just to gamify it a bit, like keep track of who's the most popular, posting the most, getting the most likes, kind of thing in the community. Um, and then it has the ability to charge a subscription fee. So you can start a free community, or you can, charge $9 or $200 or whatever you want members to pay to join your community, and school will handle all of the payments for you on the back end.
Understood. And I guess I can see the value in utilizing a platform like that for your business. I could see the value in integrating a platform like that for my business. Um, have you seen advisors specifically use it, or and if so, how are they using it? If not, where do you see them being able to use it? Like, is this something that they can integrate into their offering as well?
I definitely think so, although I would say there's probably not a lot of advisors using it yet. But we're like right on the fringe. I actually just met a fellow today who's an advisor in the UK, and he just started a school community like today for his group of advisors that he's coaching in the UK. So that was really cool. So I think in the beginning, it's going to be like coaches and consultants starting communities for advisors. And then I think from there, advisors will start communities for their niche, basically. Um, and the idea is like a group funnel. So I don't know if you've heard this term, but you basically have a regular funnel. You've got top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and then client out the bottom. But a group funnel is where all of your different platforms, all of the ways you're doing marketing, you funnel people towards a free community. And in that free community, you kind of give a taste of the services or the offering that you have. Um, so in a way, giving away free value in your free group community. And so people get to know you, and they get to interact with your clients. They get to interact with other people, maybe interested in working with you. And then from that free group funnel, you can offer a paid whatever your paid offering is. Um, so it's just a little bit more human way of selling versus like, a video sales letter and trying to make a sale like from a Facebook ad within 10 minutes. Like Facebook ad, video sales letter, buy something. Instead, you like pick your marketing to a group community, and then, nurture them before they work with you.
Understood. And again, I find it to make all the sense in the world for folks like you and I. And I'm not sure if you know this answer or yet, but if I'm an advisor listening to this, my first question would be, what's the deal with compliance on something like that? Have you looked into that at all? I'm just trying to get a sense as to if there are compliance hurdles that advisors would need to address in advance.
I think with compliance, it would be if you have clients that are paying you and potentially sharing like private information in a community setting. Um, I don't know that will, I do think people will figure out a way to overcome that and actually like do financial coaching in community. I think that's a pretty cool future reality. Um, but I don't see a free group community any different than like a free Facebook group, or, any other ways that advisors are nurturing their prospects. Putting content out on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever they're putting out content. I don't see how that's any different in like a free community than it would be on another platform.
Understood. So whatever the compliance process is with making a LinkedIn post or whatever, it'd probably be similar-ish to the community aspect.
Yeah. And I
Gotcha.
think like the rest of the industry, like if you're in a strict BD versus if you're like an independent RIA, you will have a lot more freedom to try out the new marketing techniques in a way. But I think even down the line, people are getting more and more used to using podcasts, social media, et cetera, to do
Mhm.
marketing.
But where I see it potentially being effective is, I think, for advisors specifically who have like a subscription model to their business, right? Where they're charging a couple $100, $300, $400 a month, whatever whatever the number is. I can see how having a kind of finance 101, 201, 301 sort of vibe to a course where there's a community aspect to it as well, giving them access to something like that can further elevate their value proposition. Because I know a lot of times I hear with subscription folks how after the brunt of the planning is done, sometimes they struggle with like justifying that ongoing engagement
Sure.
and getting folks to renew after the first year. So I think something like this could further justify it. And then even for, other advisors who perhaps they have minimums, like a $500,000 minimum, $250,000 minimum, whatever their minimum structure is. Oftentimes you get referrals that are below that minimum, and you don't want to necessarily discourage the person who made that referral from giving future ones if you just say, hey, it's not a fit, and don't spend any time with them. So if you can almost have, whether it's free or 50, $100 a month, whatever the price is, have sort of like a downsell where you point them in the right direction and you say, hey, but in the meantime, until you get to a point where it makes sense for us to work together, why don't you go and join this community that I put together? There's a lot of financial planning principle, oriented videos in there. There's other clients and folks in my network that are a part of it, so you can ask questions and consume those videos. I can picture it as a way to elevate a subscription model offering to provide more
Yeah.
value, and a way to downsell if someone's not a good fit, but still keep them in your ecosystem so that when they are ready to work with an advisor, they think of you because you've provided value in the meantime in a leveraged fashion. Um,
Right.
so I can sort of see how, and it'll be interesting. We're recording this on February 1st. I don't know when it's going to be released, but I'll be curious and interested in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, how many folks actually brought that, because I feel like this is something that's still in its infancy,
Sure.
where advisors can have sort of a first mover advantage if they're able to crack the code and integrate this into their practice.
Yeah, and I think like just how advisors get paid. It was like commissions and then AUM and then AUM plus planning fees and then some just planning fees. But that was how like XYPN was able to encourage advisors to work with younger and younger clients is like you can just charge them a planning fee. But then even down the line, like there's still a huge part of the population that's not going to pay $250 a month for like your average planning fee. So there are some communities I'd say already, not necessarily on school, but some communities where it's like $99 a month or $89 a month, where the advisor is giving some sort of content. I don't know that the clients are interacting with each other per se, but I think the one-to-many model is the way to work with, lower and lower incomes, basically.
Yeah, and I think too, in my mind, is kind of going all over the place right now with ideas, but I also think, so let's say, the advisor's working with, 50, 60 year olds, right? Maybe 70, 80 year olds as well. Well, they have kids. Maybe they have grandkids that are, call it, of age, right? In
Sure.
the workforce already. Um, and they may not be good prospects for the business, but it's not a bad idea to start to build a relationship with them so that ultimately when their parents or grandparents pass away, perhaps you can retain those assets because you already have a relationship with the kids, and now they are qualified clients because of the inheritance that they receive. So I feel like you can build out different offerings, such as you know a course for you know kids in high school or college to like lay the foundations of a good financial planning mindset and creating habits and things like that. And that could just be something as a free value add to your current clients and their kids or grandkids that are in that life stage, then you can have a more call it robust school, so to speak, community video course for folks that are maybe in their 20s and 30s that are just laying the foundation. And in theory, you have these folks kind of graduate, so to speak, from one thing to the next. And again, you're building relationships with the next generation in a leveraged fashion. So again, my mind's just kind of spinning with ideas, but I could see
Yeah.
how if an advisor is willing to put in the initial upfront work, because it's probably a lot of work, right? Creating the video course and things like that. Um, but if they're willing to put in the upfront work over time, you're going to have a massive ecosystem of future clients. So I think the work they put in would certainly be worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of great ways to use it. And then even working kind of back up the ladder, in my last position, I was able to participate in some like pretty expensive business masterminds. And there's the like personal one-on-one with a coach. But getting to work with a coach like and sit in on a call where a business coach is working with another business owner, and then he might work with another one, then he might work with you, and getting to see what they're saying to other people, I actually think is really helpful that you won't get in just like a one-on-one relationship. Um, so I think that more and more you may see financial advisors working with like multiple clients in their niche at the same time, potentially in like a one-to-many group setting. I don't know. We'll see. That's kind of my vision for the future. I don't know how that will play out, but
In theory, it sounds good. I think where it maybe get tricky is, there's maybe personal information that people wouldn't be comfortable sharing in a group, but there's also the reality that like everyone's situation is different, although you can probably give similar advice to all of them. So I think that's where it may get a little tricky, but I'd be curious to see how that shakes out long term. I'd
yeah.
like to pivot slightly. So again, part of the reason why we came together is you had highlighted me with a list of 25 or 50, whatever the number was, in terms of movers and shakers on LinkedIn. You had highlighted me for the podcast. And my immediate reaction when I saw that I was tagged in that post was, who's this guy? And then there was gratitude as a reaction as well. Like, oh, like I'm on a list with some cool people. Like this is great. Then my reaction after that was, this is super helpful. Now I know who the other people are in the industry in a well compiled list. Now I know who they are for networking purposes and future podcast guests and things like that. And then it resulted in, I think I commented like, hey, thanks, man. Like, want to hop on the pod and fast forward, here we are. So my first question is, was that an idea that you came up with? Had you seen other people do something similar and you're like, oh, I can do this. I can apply it to my network. Where did the idea spawn from?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different nuggets I feel like we can get from this. I think my first idea was to track people's follower accounts on LinkedIn. So it's like I'd love to see a list of people, based on follower count. There's all these lists in the industry, like top 100 advisors or top 40 podcasts or top this, but they're all like hypothetical. Nobody actually has data like this podcast has the most downloads or the most
Hmm.
listens. So it's like, it's just based on the person writing its opinion of who should go first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Um, so it's kind of made up. But I was like, if I know all of their follower accounts, I can like actually create a list based on an actual number. Um, and so I mean, some people have argued like follower counts just vanity metrics, like it doesn't really matter. But in a way, it does matter. And I think that based on all the reactions I've gotten, that I'm kind of proving that it matters because it gets people's attention. Um, and so this was kind of I realized it after the fact, but I was like, okay, I have all these people's LinkedIn data now. Like, what else can I do with it? So then I was like, well, I could rank their podcasts by how many LinkedIn followers they have. But then after that, I honestly got like 4 or 5 introductions to be on a podcast, which led me to think like a big theme in marketing right now is like give value first. Like Alex Ramosi talks about this a lot, like give, 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 give until they beg you to work with you,
Yeah.
basically. Um, but like I'm basically giving value to all the people on that list. And then in turn, they're like, hey, do you want to be on our podcast? Which is kind of like inbound marketing, I would say, putting out
Hmm.
content and then I get contacted. The other option would be, make a list of the top 100 podcasts and send them all an email and say, hey, can I be on your podcast? Um, and what I'm finding just as I try like various inbound and outbound marketing techniques is that inbound actually is like higher quality. First, I would say. I mean, everybody's getting bugged all the time with like outbound stuff, LinkedIn messages, DMs, cold emails, etc. And a lot of that stuff just gets ignored. Some of it does work, and I'm not necessarily saying you shouldn't do it, but like creating valuable content for your target audience where they come to you because you've actually given something valuable away first. I just feel like it's like a higher tier level of marketing, I guess.
Well, and I would say too, it to a degree, assuming that whatever someone's offering and the other person needs, it shortens the sales cycle as well because you're not a random person. They've not only been put on your radar because of aggregating a list like that or whatever the technique is, but they probably also scrolled through your social media. They've Googled who you were. They did a little bit of research, and so they had an idea as to um, who you were and what you do. And but I would also say for advisors, I'll give a few different examples. So one of my clients has already executed and borrowed this idea from you. You may remember getting
Okay.
tagged by a gentleman by the name of Ryan DeRusso. Um, so he primarily works with private practice physical therapists, and he's had an initiative to do joint webinars with other companies and folks who support therapists. He's also had an initiative to join various industry podcasts as well. Like he did a webinar with like a bookkeeping company that works with therapists specifically in their practice. And I want to say immediately, and I may be misquoting the numbers, but they'll be close. I want to say immediately upon finishing or that episode being released, he got like 14 appointments on his calendar. And
Wow.
then over the next week, he got another like 5 or 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's done plenty of webinars or podcasts where maybe one or two people, but that was a cool one. But what he did, and he's already gotten some podcast and webinar opportunities from it, is he modeled your article on LinkedIn, and I think he even tagged you to give you some credit on it.
Yeah.
But he aggregated, I believe, the top podcasts for physical therapists, and he's already starting to see results, and I can see it able to be applied to another client of mine who works primarily with attorneys, right? Doing something similar. And I actually just got off a call with him. So I should bring that up in our next session. And then I can also see this being super valuable for folks who um, focus on like business owners, right? Highlighting, local business owners, be it on a podcast, interview style podcast, or something similar to what you did and compile all the area business owners and add them to a list, tag them, all that type of stuff. So I think I don't want to necessarily call it, hacking the system, so to speak, but it kind of shortcuts the process of becoming relevant to these people without even asking for anything. You're just highlighting them. And everyone has, to a certain degree, a level of ego about them. Some too much, but some's the right amount. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it felt good when I was tagged in both of those posts, right? And
Sure.
and I'm starting to see my clients implement something similar. And yeah, I just think it's a great way to get on people's radar and increase their awareness around who you are and what you do. And some people may reach out right away, and other people's will stay tuned with what else you do. And they'll come over the fence, so to speak, eventually. But I just think it's a great way to get on people's radar.
Yeah. No, and I mean hacking the system in a way because I feel like it's a way to jumpstart. Let's say you're starting a brand new business and you're following the ACP method, which is like audience community product. So you're building an audience, but building an audience for yourself from scratch is very difficult. Um, so there's this idea like the niche 100, which is find 100 people already talking to your audience or already that already have their attention, like exactly what your client was doing with the bookkeeper for I believe it was therapists. So like find other people also serving therapists and get on their podcast or get in touch with them somehow. And then you can use all these other 100 people's audiences to build your audience like way, way, way faster than you're gonna do it, building it on your own. Um, and as long as you're giving them value in the process, I think it's a great way to get their attention and then also serve their audience.
Well, and there was um, as I mentioned, the feelings of, who is this guy? Oh, this is cool. Thank you. Um, One emotion that I forgot to share is I also had a sense of obligation to interact with that post.
Right.
So when you figure you're getting exposure just with you making a post, tagging these people, them interacting. Now my network on LinkedIn is seeing that interaction. They're like, oh, who's Joe? Let me connect with them. And then person number two, person number three, person number four, all these people who were tagged, I would imagine you got at least half, if not 75% or more, respond to the post with some gratitude and interaction. And that gives you exposure. And it's ironic that you picked folks with the largest LinkedIn following. So now you get exposure to this massive audience of advisors.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it's a good way to sort of uh, thoughtfully shortcut the process of building your audience by leveraging other people's in a helpful and valuable way.
Yeah. No, and some of those posts, like I made them a month or two ago, and I'm still like they're still my top performing posts week over week. Like
Yeah.
they're getting impressions at the same level as like my brand new post from like 2 months ago. Um, so that content that you put out there like continues to bring you impressions for quite a while after you do it.
Yeah, it's I'm so curious, fast forward a year, I'm so curious. You're gonna be able to look back and be like, this post totally changed the trajectory of my business and the network that I have around me of people that I'm doing business with. So I'd be curious to see what other, uh, lack of a better way to put it, aggregation articles that you put out, but it'll be cool to see. I do want to, pivot slightly. So one of the if this is your first time listening to one of our episodes, one of the things that we ask all of our guests is about a book that's had an impact on them. And it's our way of sort of distilling a reading list for all of you, because I find a lot of times we can get stuck in the particular industry that we're in, but there's so much knowledge out there. We brought up Alex Hormozy, like he has two main books, $100 million leads, $100 million offers that you could easily take that. It's industry agnostic. You could take that and apply it to our industry. So that's what we're trying to do here is just pick the brains of the folks that we're having on the show and figure out a book that's had an impact on them. And Joe, you mentioned a book by Tim Ferriss, which I actually haven't read. I've read, the 4 Hour Work Week, but it's The Tribe of Mentors. Um, Talk to me about that briefly. What's sort of your main takeaways and what's the impact that it's had on you so far?
Yeah, so the premise for the book is Tim Ferriss was youngish, maybe 30ish something, and he was like, "Man, life is really hard. Like, I wish I could talk to like some of the most famous people in the world and figure out how they're coping with life. Not just coping, but like how are they setting their goals and achieving their goals and also like dealing with stress and depression and stuff like that." Um, so he just sent them all letters. So it's also powerful about like the ask. He wrote to a ton of different famous people and a whole lot of them said yes. I think he probably was a little bit well known already, but still, I think that what I love about it is like they're only like 3 pages at a time per person. But life is hard and there's ups and downs. And I think like having 100 examples of how like really successful people are coping with life, both the ups and the downs, I think is just a really powerful um, tool in your tool belt, I guess. So I've had a lot of fun reading it and applying it. And there's some super like specific recommendations. Like one of his questions is, "What's the favorite thing you've bought under $100?" So they'll list like what the favorite thing they've bought, and sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but it's just really cool to have those recommendations.
That's cool. And am I understanding it correctly that it's not necessarily a book that you have to read from beginning to end, but you can kind of open up and read a 3, 4 page excerpt, and so you can kind of maybe read it through once and then just jump in it once a day to kind of review it. Is it structured like that?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and
Cool.
you can look through the list of people and you can pick out the people you know and read their sections too.
Understood. Tribe of Mentors. I'm gonna just
There's something
practice.
about the book though too, like it's a huge book, but yet it's somehow very light. I don't know how they did that, if they used like really light paper.
Like weight wise, you're saying?
Yeah, it's a chunk of a book, but yet it's not that heavy.
Inter
It's very interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, if you pack it on the trip, you won't go overweight and have to go through your suitcase. But
Right.
to practice what I preach, I just bought it myself. It'll be here in 2 days. Um, the other thing, the takeaway was, so I've latched onto this saying called, or phrase, I should say. And the way the phrase goes is you have not because you ask not, right?
Yeah.
So typically people are wondering, why don't I have this life that I want? Or why don't I have this? It's like, well, have you asked for that?
Yeah.
And, to your point, maybe he was a little bit well known, but he sent out a bunch of letters and a bunch of people responded. So that can be applied to asking for referrals, asking for guidance from your network, asking for help in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's a good reminder to identify what you want and go out and ask for it, ask for help. Um,
Yeah.
but cool, man, Joe, this has been great. I do have, one more thing. So if I'm interested in, if I look at Kitsis's, tech map and I'm like, whoa, this is way too much, to take in, or maybe I'm an advisor who is looking to reevaluate my tech stack. Where do I find you? Where do I get help with that?
Yeah. So it's school.com. That's SKOOL and then backslash pro advisor suite. There's the spelling, I guess. Um, yeah, that's the best place. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think it's very easy to find because I've got like a spider web and a graph going up around my name. So Joe Moss with the emojis.
Awesome. Yeah, and I would highly encourage you all to connect with him on LinkedIn. What I've seen from you so far, and what I think I'll continue to see, is you bringing the industry together. So even if you're not doing business directly with Joe in some way, shape, or form, you're a great resource for putting other movers and shakers from our industry on the radars of advisors. So at the very least, connect with them and continue or excuse me, consider going to school with Joe, so to speak.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, Joe, appreciate you joining. For all you listening, appreciate your time and attention as always. It's always amazing when I'm looking at the podcast stat and I'm like, really, that many people are tuning in, so appreciate your time and attention. If you haven't yet left us a review on Apple or Spotify, we'd be super grateful if you did that, and if you found this episode to be helpful, click that share button and share it with someone that you think would also enjoy it. But until next time, uh, Joe, thanks for joining.
All right. Thanks for having me.